Listeners, hope you're doing well. Tommy, first, good morning. There you go, Tommy. I'll take my Moscow time prize, please. The prize is going to be a funny Moscow time. It's one of the funniest today. I've got some great submissions or additions or whatever you want to call it. Matt, good morning, Breakup Gang. Good morning, Matt. Ben, good morning, team. T-Dog, Yo-Yo. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, T-Dog. Hodl, T. Washington. Love the name. Wake up to Breakup. Morning, all. We're going to wake up. If you're not woken up already, we're going to wake you up today. Good morning. Hit it. We love the likes. Hit the like. Right? Hit the like. Hit the like the buy button, we say. Good bon matin. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, B for victory. Nice to see you here. Enmity, what's up? Good morning, team. CK in the house. Was lucky enough to see CK last week in Amsterdam. He's looking good and healthy. Make sure to share the show. That's great advice. That's great advice. Joseph, what's up, my man? Good morning. Good morning, Christine. You know, we love when ladies come to watch the show. Not to single you out, Christine, but I'm embarrassed about the lack of females that hang out with us. So you're making me look good, so I appreciate it. I appreciate it. We love this show. Thanks a lot, man. All right, Greg, we love it, man. Super cool. All right, let's just acknowledge for really important purposes, right? If this wasn't the case, we'd be in big trouble. The sun's up, right? Equally, if Bitcoin wasn't running, we'd have other things to do right now, but it's running. Okay. So we got a sun up, we got a Bitcoin running. All that's left for us to do, I guess, right? Everything's fine, right? Let's have a coffee and talk about what's new. All right. Today's Moscow time is beautiful. We got a beautiful one, right? We got a beautiful Moscow time. We get this from NBC News. You know what we say about NBC News, right? So NBC News says a January 6th rioter who smashed a window and received signed Trump hat is sentenced to more than 4 years. You got an autograph? 4 years. Rachel Powell is her name, known as Bullhorn Lady, broke a Capitol window before using a bullhorn to tell rioters they should coordinate together if you're going to take the building. So she's in jail for 4 years for that. So bye. This is, you know, I find the Freedom Convoy in Canada sort of the same vibes as January 6th in some ways, right? So there's a court case right now going on about the actual plaintiff in the case who made the noise complaint against the the rioters, right? The Freedom Convoy. So here we go. This is from CBC News, right? So not to be confused with NPC News. This is somewhat different. Freedom Convoy made it near impossible to live, Jexi Lee tells trial. Trial of convoy leaders Tamara Litch and Chris Barber enters its 17th day. So let's just read a little bit about the article, right? The young public servant thrust into the spotlight when she agreed to become the lead plaintiff in a multi-million-dollar proposed class action against the Freedom Convoy organizers is testifying in the criminal trial of two of them. Jexi Lee's testimony came on the 17th day of the trial. So here's what she said, right? It was impossible to go to work, right? So just take everyone's bank accounts, right? I'm now of the belief it was worth it for me to become a terrorist in the country I was born in. This young public servant, Jexi Lee, had trouble getting to work. Could you imagine? Wow, now it's all worth it. Thanks. All right. Now, you know, because Jexi Lee had trouble going to work, it actually orange-pilled RFK and several other people. So, you know, maybe there was some worthwhile nature of Jexi Lee having trouble getting to work, right? But listen to how bad it was. All right, this is the case, right? She said the horns blared most commonly between 7 in the morning and 11 at night. Ooh, wow. And she described it as very loud noise. Right, it was very loud. Okay. So in the end, it didn't go well for her. She ran out of the place crying. We don't know why. But she said that it did permeate her existence, the noise. It permeated her existence. So I'm just so happy that this young public servant can go back to work now, because if she didn't, I mean, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have a country anymore. It would just fall apart, right? So Jexi, I hope you get your money. What an important case. I'm glad that they're covering it. Axios, right? We've made the mistake before of saying Axios can sort of play it down the middle. They're not right or left necessarily. Well, forget all that, right? This is a actual headline. I'm just going to read it from Axios. By using the term open border, conservatives are suggesting that anyone can get into the United States without much hassle. But the reality is the southern border is more fortified than it's ever been. Axios explains the myth of the US-Mexico open border. It's a myth, guys. It's not true, okay? You can't just walk across. All those videos you see, right? RFK went down there. You're an idiot, okay? It's more fortified, just like our elections, right? The US elections, so much democracy fortification going on that who could complain, right? It's the same with the borders. There's more fortifications, they say, right? Fortifications. So we're good. Don't worry about it. It's nothing, right? But this one's great, right? So Salon, all right. What does Salon say? Deprogramming the Trump cult. Is it too late to humanize those who worship at the altar of MAGA? Is it too late to humanize them, right? Is it? Might be, right? They might just be dogs, right? It might be too late to humanize them. Hillary Clinton says MAGA voters need to be saved from themselves. Experts on exactly what that might take. It's true. It's true. Deprogramming is needed. And we saw a pretty good example of deprogramming yesterday. We're going to get into our theme for the day, right? How does the fake news like them apples? Of course, I've stolen that from the famous "How do you like them apples" line, which most in our generation would recognize from Good Will Hunting, right? You like apples? You like apples? How do you like them apples? I got her number, right? That very famous scene in the movie Good Will Hunting. It actually comes, I think, from a war tank. That's what I understand. I looked up where the expression came from today. I didn't know. It was the name of one of the American tanks from, I forget which World War, but I would assume World War One. And not that it was a big tank affair in World War One, but nevertheless, what they would say is because it looked like an apple, I guess the way it was made or the top of it or something like that, and it would shoot. So they'd say, how do you like them apples, as they'd kill the Germans, right? So so that's what was going on. Now, yesterday, what we saw related to apples was Pierre Poliver speaking with a journalist, and it's kind of gone viral. I'm not sure where they are. I feel like it's not far from my farm, by the way. Big Apple. All the sort of apple barons of Quebec just live up the hill from my farm in Vermont. Some amazing apples. When I drive back to the city, I just go through miles and miles of apple orchards. Really nice stuff. I think he was there. It looks like it. It was kind of cloudy and hard to tell, but here's what everyone's talking about. And even Elon Musk picked up on this interview. So that's how much it's gone around the world. So what you get is a low IQ journalist. And you see him having a case of cognitive dissonance live, right? And so the thing that really makes it is Poliver sort of munching on an apple, and all he's asking the journalist to do is make a coherent sentence. He's just like, can you just say that again, right? But the journalist is too stupid, and he's suffering from actual cognitive dissonance as we watch, right? So what does cognitive dissonance look like? It's word salad. That's one of the ways you can tell you've got cognitive dissonance, right? Attacking the other person, right? You get some ad hominem in there, right? He's mind reading within it, right? So he's saying you do like Trump, and you do these things, and you appeal to people's like emotions or something like that, right? So he made no sense whatsoever. So I can't really reiterate what he said. It really just was an example of a journalist having cognitive dissonance. And what have we talked about many, many times? One of the things we can do as Bitcoiners when we see cognitive dissonance about a number of subjects is just have the person explain it to you. And that's all Poliver did, right? So Poliver just says, can you just say the sentence again? Can you make this make sense? I don't even understand what you're saying, right? He even tries to do it's too complicated for you. Like as if he's smarter than Poliver, right? Oh, it's too complicated for you. But again, seeing this stuff modeled live, right? I just had a nice note from Ava of Lardingerbrook this morning and saying, thanks for bringing me to Amsterdam, and it was a great time, and I appreciated everything, and blah, blah, blah. See you in Nashville. I think she'll be there next summer. Again, one of the reasons why I thought she was such a great speaker for us is because actually modeling people understanding Bitcoin live on stage is one of the most persuasive ways you can uh, frame Bitcoin and talk about Bitcoin, like live instances of people having a bit of a aha moment is really powerful. And watching Oliver yesterday try to get a journalist to just make a sentence, like a sentence, right? Say an English sentence. Now, the journalist is bilingual, so I'll give him maybe a little bit of leeway because he's French and maybe he was having trouble organizing the words, but it didn't look like that. What you saw, what I saw anyway, was a low IQ individual suffering from cognitive dissonance before our eyes, incapable of making a sentence. And I guess low IQ is kind of, maybe he has a high IQ, who knows, right? And remember, IQ is not really a sorting factor when it comes to suffering from cognitive dissonance, right? High IQ people can get it just as easily, maybe easier than low IQ people, right? So the IQ part is not necessarily needed. I only bring it in because he tries to actually pull the, it's too complicated for you, Pierre. It's too complicated, right? Only I, as a journalist, can understand this, right? It's so complicated. So the good news about having this modeled before everyone and showing everyone what it looks like to confront one of these people who is suffering from cognitive dissonance and forcing them, right? Don't give them an out. The minute you argue with someone who has cognitive dissonance, what you're actually doing is giving them solid ground to work off of, because tension and opposition and contrast between black and white is enough for some of these people to perpetuate their confusion, right? But if you just don't provide the opposition for them to latch onto and just state your point of view, like I'm curious, I'm interested in listening. What is it you're talking about, right? So watching this person flail is one of the funniest things you'll ever see, and that's why everyone's been sharing it. You get Ian Michaels Chong saying Oliver gives a master class on how to handle a left-wing journalist, and he eats an apple while he's doing it. The apple crunching and the dismissive nature was excellent, right? Excellent. Really a master class. Now, the journalist indeed was acting like an NPC, right? Now, here's what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to test out my new Bitcoiner's Guide to NPC Management outline that I have. And because I've got pretty much the whole thing down now, and I think I know how I'm going to publish it, because I've come to the conclusion, right, that with everything that we see out there, with all the dangers that we're risking, this whole Mike Cernovich Bolshevik revolution thing is looking more and more realistic. Like, we're going to get deprogram hunted pretty fucking soon, right? So at this point, we all have a job to deprogram these dangerous people in our lives. And that's exactly how I wrote the book, right? So, in general, the NPCs are not, they can be benign, but the problem is once their hypnotism is turned on killing you, they're going to do it without even hesitating, right? That's how powerful the programming is that they're suffering from. So it has now come to my attention that we absolutely must prioritize deprogramming people. And it looks like it's going to be a job for all of us, right? I don't think there's any way around it. We're going to have to deprogram people at scale. Now, the good news is Bitcoin is the ultimate tool to deprogram people. And that's why I think Bitcoin is the ultimate tool to manage NPCs, both to reorient them, right? Because reorienting them is really helpful to get them out of your way. The whole point here is to increase your quality of life, to increase your freedom of speech, and to be able to live amongst these people and not suffer too many risks and dangers. And if we don't reprogram and deprogram people, just exactly as Hillary said, right? Hillary is right. There's a massive deprogramming mission that has to go on. We just have to be the ones who are deprogramming, because if we're not, things are going to get much, much worse, right? Then you can understand why all of history is fake, because it looks like they're going to redo all the history books and everything to make it look like our version of history that we're living through right now was the fake one, right? And you can do that. So what we saw yesterday from Oliver deprogramming reminded me of the opportunity that we have to deprogram people at scale right now and how we use Bitcoin to do it. So here's the frame that I came up with, right? So some of the stuff, is not. So some of this stuff is not going to be, we're still going to filter in every news story that's going on today into this frame. So what I'm about to share is not exactly the book. It's just the book in practice, right? So first of all, what you do, and this is how Bitcoin can be used in my book, right? You use Bitcoin to identify, first of all, whether or not someone's an NPC. Very simple way of doing that, right? Do they have a first contact story with Bitcoin? Do they have a first contact story with Bitcoin, right? If they do not have a first contact story with Bitcoin, that's the easiest. NPC automatically, right? If they don't even know what you're talking, what's Bitcoin? Just automatic, right? Automatic NPC. There's no way around it. Now, that's the simplest thing. Now, the next group of how to actually and those ones are a little easier to deprogram because they're such basic NPCs. You don't really have to worry about them too much. The ones where you do have to worry, and that seem a little more applied brainwashing, right? So they're a little more involved in perpetuating brainwashing, a little more involved in taking talking points, taking the payload of information that's being downloaded into their brains and acting on it, right? So those are the ones that are a little more difficult. They're participants in it, not in a conscious way, right? They don't know the good guys and the bad guys. They have an idea, they think they know, but that's what we're dealing with. So what you do there is you take the first contact story they do have with Bitcoin, right? So these aren't the people that have zero first contact story. They have a first contact story with Bitcoin, but that actual first contact story allows you to guess more or less, right, at the other payload that has come with their brainwashing. So here are the types of stories that you'll usually see, right? And the types of NPCs that you can identify. So it starts with identify NPCs, then it starts with specify NPCs. And Bitcoin can help you get to both points, right? So the first one that you have is credentialists, right? So those are the ones, oh, government's going to ban it, right? That's they're always their first reaction to Bitcoin. Now, when they say government is going to ban it, what they're actually saying is they believe in all these other things, right? They're saying they believe in the hierarchy of news. They believe in the primacy of academia, for example, in verifying the news. That's why you'll hear them still reference experts, right? So credentialists, people who believe the government has the power to actually suppress Bitcoin, will give that as an answer to their first contact to Bitcoin, right? So with that, you can actually guess many things that come with their point of view. Now, the way I structure the book is first we can identify, then we can specify, right? So credentialists, usually that answer, you can guess at the rest of the payload. And by the rest of the payload, what I really mean is you can decipher the wants and fears of that NPC type, right? And once you know what either motivates them or they're afraid of, and that's really what we all are, right? I don't believe in logic, or I don't believe in free will. None of these things are real, right? Intelligence, we're rational, we're not even close. We have wants and we have fears, and those combine to give us direction on what has to happen next. Once we settle on that, whether it's something we really want or something that we're really afraid of, we just organize our thoughts to look like logic so that we can make sense of the decision after it's already been made. We call that logic and rationality, but we're not that, right? It's already been predetermined by either the scale of fear you have at the issue or the scale of want you have. One of the two. Fear will trump want, right? It's slightly stronger. So you got to be careful of that. Now, when you are looking at the rest of the payload that comes with the Bitcoin first contact story, what you're actually able to do is decipher more or less the wants and fears of these groups. Once you understand the wants and fears of them, you can do the third step in the NPC management protocol, which is to electrify them, wake them up, right? You're not going to do it with arguments, though. This is not an argument game. I'm not telling you which arguments to put in place when or anything like that, right? What I am saying is the things you can do, just like Pierre Poliver, when he just asked the guy, hey, say a sentence, right? Speak English in a sentence and make your question make sense, which is what he couldn't do, right? So first of all, you can trigger cognitive dissonance, and then you can leave them to explain it to you, right? So that's a really important thing. So with the credentialist, their wants and needs, or their wants and fears, are really simple. It's prestige, right? It always has been prestige, right? It's a major thing, right? That's why the hierarchy of truth comes into play when it comes to experts and the scientific method and publications and credentialism and stamps of approval and all those other things, right? That's all a prestige game. The opposite of that, the opposite of prestige, of course, is embarrassment, right? So that's the main fear here that credentialists, I think anyway, are motivated by is the fear of being embarrassed, right? That can't work, which is why I always stress that one of the best things Bitcoiners have done to protect themselves against fake news and being persuaded by other NPCs is we seem to have dulled our um, exposure to being embarrassed, right? Being a Bitcoiner for such a long time, you have to necessarily get used to people laughing at your opinions. You kind of have to get used to being on the outside certain times. So we're all pretty well trained in not being embarrassed, and it continues to be a really important tool, a really important skill to have as a Bitcoiner, a really important skill for survival in the Bitcoin world as we go through all these changes. So it's something that credentialists lack, and it is something we can exploit, right? And because of it being something that we can exploit, right? There's you can do the Pierre Poliver method, right? Just explain it. But the best way that I've found to deal with credentialists is to use pity, right? Not argue with them, but it's to use pity. That's when you say, I'm really sorry for what your news sources have done to you, and I'm just so sad for you that your opinions are this, right? That this is what you've come to. So it's not about so take for example what's going on with censorship and what's going on in Ukraine right now and what's going on with the Biden crime family, right? So if you look at the Biden crime family right now, right, we've seen the story play out in Ukraine. We saw it yesterday with Natalie Winter's report on what's going on in China with the Bidens, right? It looks like the whole Iran question is about the $6 billion that the U.S. unfroze for oil and gas royalties for Iran had some relation to China, if you read the article, right? Now, remember we talked about those that CIA citadel outside of Houston a few weeks ago. So there's a city of about 70,000 people that doesn't even appear on a map. It's just outside of Houston, Texas. It's all illegals, right? And there's special provisions for them to get bank loans. It turns out that the Biden government actually threatened, I guess the company is called, let me see what it's called. The company was called, where is it here? It's E-Plaza. It's like some banking service thing for illegals. They actually threatened, the White House threatened to make it illegal for banks like E-Plaza to turn down undocumented workers in America for these bank loans. Now they're usurious, they're terrible, right? But we talked about how this happened, why it happened, who's making money off of it, and all of these things, right? Now, I don't know the exact answers to all of this, but it looks like if you add up the Biden activity with Burisma in Ukraine, which looks more and more like a U.S. operation, it looks more and more like the Bidens were, as you know, caught in HD, caught in 4K, the corruption, right? There doesn't look to be any denial around it or ability to defend against it. It looks It looks as simple and clear cut as you can imagine. So on this one, right, what you need to do in order to deal with the credentialists is a number of things, right? So you can get them to explain to you what's going on with the Bidens and the laptop, but they'll probably double down, right? They'll probably double down. So you're probably not going to get anywhere there asking them, as Paul Ever did, just say the question, like, what are you saying about, whatever. In this case, you're probably just going to get a short circuit, probably going to get them to try to get an argument. But what I found is one of the better ways to deal with this is to go back and use a blunt instrument against the credentialists, which is Elon Musk and his status as richest man in the world, right? So the status Elon Musk has as richest man in the world is just a little bit of a bonus weapon for us. And by that, I mean, because he is the richest and it's such an easy concept, right? You can actually pit him and what he does against other people, other rich people. And this is how you can actually affect the credentialist, right? So everything the credentialist doesn't know comes from the Twitter files. They probably already think that X is an anti-Semitic MAGA place and all that stuff, right? So that's an important let's say, negative factor when you're trying to persuade these people. But what you can do is just rely on his status as the richest person in the world and then compare what he does as the richest person in the world to other rich people, right? So you can say that Elon uses his billions, right, for space exploration, for cheap internet. And I think when he comes out with his new phone, which he's going to have to because Apple is going to keep screwing him over and they're going to try and get X out of the App Store guaranteed by the 2024 election if we have one, right? So I can't imagine it's going to last much longer. And I think Apple's going to do the thing they dared not do a year ago. You remember that when they tried that out, they tested it out. Oh, we're going to get rid of Twitter from the App Store, and everybody freaked out. Remember that? And they had to issue a statement, and people were so angry. So now that it's already been digested, they could probably get away with it much easier next time. So I do anticipate this is happening, which means Musk is going to have to make a phone. And the good news about that phone is that it's not going to be wired into third-party carriers. It's going to be your own phone, and it will connect to his satellites. So there will be no terrestrial satellites for any of this stuff. Now, it was supposed to be T-Mobile that was allowing this to happen in the short term. Looks like that deal's already fallen apart. I'm guessing it wasn't engineering. It could be engineering. I'm guessing it wasn't an engineering hiccup. I think it was political. So I think he's going to have to go to some form of hardware distribution in order to make this thing happen, which is fine, right? He looks pretty good at making hardware with the cars, so I don't think that'll be a problem. He's even, remember when he offered to pay for world hunger? Right. So all of these things are the things Elon's doing. Meanwhile, you can compare him to George Soros, right? That's a pretty easy one. I try not to bring George Soros's name up with liberals because he has been, let's say, overexposed by conservatives, right? Who don't really always know what it exactly is that he's done. So that one doesn't work. Bill Gates does work, though, right? So he's out there buying farmland, right? The vaccines, all that kind of stuff. So you can easily contrast that. But the best one to contrast is Jeff Bezos, because they both have this rocket thing going on, right? We've got rockets. But the relevant factor here is Elon goes ahead and buys X for whatever billion. We know Bezos has owned the Washington Post for a long time now. And what we were talking about yesterday with the Washington Post losing $100 million a year, right? It loses $100 million a year, right? You think Bezos was like, I got an idea, right? I got an idea. It's going to be a great business. I'm going to lose $100 million a year. This is a guy who makes one of the best companies in the world. No problem losing $100 million a year. So now you understand why the media is so angry with Elon, right? And you can use all of Elon's troubles with the law right now in order to contrast what's going on with Jeff Bezos. So the SEC cases, the investigation into the no refugees rocket scientist problem, right? So there you go. The fact that Elon Musk is the world's richest man does make the rhetorical flourish of using his name persuasive, and you can actually use it to deprogram some credentialists by saying the richest ones on our team. And then, of course, the fear, the embarrassment here of them being on the wrong team, being duped by the media, could be enough to wake some of them up. So that's just one example, right? But really, it is pity, right? It starts with pity, right? You don't know that Elon is suffering from this corruption thing. You really gotta look into it, right? So it's pity. It's not arguing, right? You should use laughter at them, right? You should mock them with laughter. Don't engage, don't throw mud, anything like that. Don't let them get you angry. Remember, one of the most important things about deprogramming is that you're not angry. You can't deprogram anyone if you're angry. If you're angry, it makes it very easy for them to put their back against the wall, get back on their moral high ground. Oh, you're angry. You can't do it, right? You cannot get angry. It's pity the fool, right? It is pity the fool. It's the Mr. T approach, right? So I have a few approaches, tools, right? I call that one the Mr. T approach. I've got the Optimus Prime, right? Some of these NPCs in the Bitcoin world, if you want to flush them out, it's being super optimistic, right? That will just crush them, right? They can't stand the light. So optimism works regularly. So I got a couple names for all of these tricks, and each of them are a little different. All right, so Mike Ben Cyber has helped us learn about understanding the censorship industry. The censorship industry basically related to every one of the Biden's activities. Only X platform is interested in following the money. So again, you just use this idea that the richest man in the world is willing to create a system that loses him money in order to get us a lot of information, a lot of money, versus what we see with Bezos, who's also willing to lose a lot of money, but for whom, right? So it's a very simple contrast. Compare the rich people, use that for the credentialists to make it for them to make sense, right? You're not actually there. Remember, you're not actually arguing this stuff. You're just giving them a little bit of a direction so that they can wake up for themselves, right? So the deprogramming has to happen within them, right? That's part of it. But you can put them on the track, which is why the protocol looks like this. It starts with identify, specify, then electrify, right? So wake up, right? Get some energy into them. All right, so the next one, so that's the credentialist. So the credentialists, again, right, their Bitcoin first contact story is governments are going to ban it. Their wants and fears are want, prestige, fear, embarrassment. Use those things to steer them in the right direction, to wake themselves up and electrify themselves with a bit of a follow the money analysis on information distribution. Who's behind the information? Which billionaire? The richest one looks to be against you. You got to get ready to kill him, right? Deprogram Elon if you're going to win this fight. So that could be enough to get them going. Now, these are all baseball statistics, though, by the way, right? So what I'm offering here, these are not 100% things. If you get 30% of converts using this system, that's a pretty good number, right? That you're an all-star. So we're dealing with baseball statistics here, and most of these aren't perfect or foolproof. So, but anyway, there you go. So the next one, right? The next one are followers. So we got credentialists. The next NPC specified type are followers, right? So followers, generally their wants and fears are pretty simple, right? Their acceptance and rejection, right? It's pretty straightforward, right? They want acceptance, afraid of rejection, right? Now, the way I think there is somewhat similar to what we see with the Elon Musk story, right? Acceptance and rejection in order to push some form of electrification inside of them. But what I think works is the you can even look at this story with the hospital in Gaza today, right? So in this case, you're looking to help them understand the news isn't the news, right? The news is not even close. The news is full of lies, but a lot of these people still aren't at the point where they even know that, right? They think the news is just the news and it could be trusted. But one of the things you can do is when these huge breaking news stories happen and they're awful, like this hospital story seems, you can see the rush for people to accuse and blame and things like that, right? We get Wesley Wang coming up with that here, saying this journalistic rush to broadcast the inflammatory claims of a terrorist group that committed mass murder against civilians will only increase the body count. Now, it doesn't look like we know what happened there, right? Biden said today the splash of the bombs looked like it was from Hamas. Everyone else in the news saying no, only Israeli bombs can make that big of a dent. There's no other way. It can't be anything like that. I think Sticks, Hex, and Hammer has it sort of perfect, right? He says, I don't care whether it was Hamas, Hezbollah, or the IDF that destroyed the Gaza hospital. That region is cursed, and no political entity from the region has ever had any interest in peace or the well-being of their citizens. Either leave them alone to act like barbarians or march in and subjugate the whole region. The Levant has only ever had anything beyond tenuous, seeming calm, except when dominated by a foreign empire, right? So again, my solution, I think, to Gaza is pretty simple. Israel takes control of security, right? And then you give everything else to the Saudis to rebuild the city. No one wants the Hamas people in their country because they basically have a mind virus, right? You should treat people from Hamas as you would anyone like that needs to be in quarantine, right? Because they've been sitting there in an open air lab experiment, cultivating a mind virus of victimhood and generational retribution and things like that for a long time now. The reason why the Saudis don't want that is because it is exactly as it looks like. It is a contagious virus that you can catch. Now, if they all had COVID, they would be stuck there, right? But you shouldn't see them as different than COVID. It's the same thing, right? These are people with a mind virus that has been used for many years by all kinds of parties because it's better to have them there than it isn't. And at this point, if you look at what Israel or Saudi is doing with the Gnome, if you look at what sound out just for me. If you look at what's going on, Trump again talking about his Freedom City initiative, right? Bitcoiners, of course, talking about citadels. I continue to believe that the big sleeper industry that no one's talking about is citadel building. That CIA citadel that we just mentioned with the financing, I think is going to go a long way to articulating the possibility and why you would do this. You know, this is, I think that Houston suburb, fake city created for and by dark money and whatever else is going on in DC with Mexico will become a pretty important story because Americans, the number one stress in normal American lives these days is real estate. It is house buying, whether you have one or whether you don't. It seems to be a preoccupying subject in most people's personal lives. It's not saturated around the news, but you hear people talking about it every day. House payments in Canada, it's the number one issue, that's for sure, right? So the idea that corruption was used to create a town out of scratch is going to hit pretty hard as people sort of get electrified and wake up. So this hospital story, right? I think anyway, you know, going into this follower thing, going into that, you can look for these third rail ways to wake them up, right? Because remember, their tension is pretty simple. It's between acceptance and rejection. And if you find a way to make this sort of smooth over, and what I think we can do with Gaza is literally invite Saudi to practice their city building techniques. And what they should do is get a nuclear reactor going that can do desalination and can be the center of this, you know, I hope anyway, prosperous Saudi-run administration that ought to be there, right? Now, the Saudis, of course, if you don't know, have a very special place in Islam, of course, because the holy sites of the religion, Mecca, Muhammad's tomb, Muhammad's mosque, are all in Saudi Arabia, which makes it the entire land the sort of holy land of the religion. And because of that, the Saudi royal family has a very important stewardship role of the religion. Now, we're not dealing with clerics that would operate in the same way that the Catholic Church would necessarily, right? But nevertheless, there is a authority that comes with that, and there's a lot of reasons why they'd be excellent stewards of Gaza, and so you can invite that sort of point of view, right? Now, the next NPC type, right, that you can get from Bitcoin, using Bitcoin, you can identify them, are the sports ball people, right? Sports ball people. Now, sports ball is basically this, right? It's when they hear about Bitcoin and their first story is, oh, it's too complicated. I'm just a simple dude, right? I don't know anything about investments. I don't know anything about investments, right? So sports ball guy, basically the wants and fears here. So their first contact is, oh, Bitcoin, I don't understand any of that stuff, right? The wants and fears are pretty simple. It's winning and losing, right? It's winning and losing. They want to win, they don't want to lose. Sports ball people are a little bit like sheep and followers. They'll often go for a team that is, you know, trending or doing really well or things like that, right? They're Yankees fans when the Yankees are winning. They're Cowboys fans in football when the Cowboys are winning. But these sports ball people, right? They do understand a few things. And right now we have a great way of persuading them something's up, right? And getting them electrified. And here's what it looks like. It looks like the flip-flop, right? So sports ball people will understand trades, right? Trading is a big thing in their business. Trading, of course, is a big thing in sports, right? And what you can do is explain the trade that we've seen in American politics. Get them to look into the trade. And the trade is as simple as yesterday, the Democrats asking for George Bush to be the Speaker of the House, right? Dick Cheney working for Democrats, right? All of this stuff is perfect because it shows that something happened and there was a flip flop. It shows that it's not just rational, it's not just opinions. And this is one of the great examples, right? This is absolutely one of the super great examples. Here's what it looks like, right? You've got Billy Crystal, who did the Lincoln Project. Remember these guys? They were big George Bush followers, big go get weapons of mass destruction. And so he tweeted yesterday, right? He actually tweeted this out loud. He said, I came to DC to work in the Reagan administration because, to oversimplify, it was pro-Constitution, pro-US global leadership, pro-military, pro-Israel, pro-democratic capitalism, and pro-American dream. And that's why I support the Biden administration and the Democrats, right? So he comes out and just does this. Glenn Greenwald picks up and he says, the liberal icon, the wise old man of MSNBC, Bill Kristol, says the reason he's now a fervent supporter of the Democrat Party and Joe Biden is because it's Biden and the Democrats who are the most steadfast supporters of Reagan ideology, right? Telling resistance liberals that they are real heirs and guardians to Reaganism is like handing out shirtless photos of Jack Smith to them. They're going to gobble up that shit and with a thirst and hunger that is insatiable. Thirsty people, right? Real thirsty people. Geez, where did I put this? Just a second here. I had so the team flipping, right? The team flipping part is really important. And you can use this team flipping to help them realize something's up, right? What about the team flipping, right? Why are they now into war and those ones? Get them to explain it to you. The same way Oliver got this journalist to try to explain a question to him. Get them to explain what they think happened with the switch, right? So if you ask a sports ball NPC person, right, why all the team changing, right? Why are all the changing teams? Their inability to answer that might just create enough curiosity that they might look into the answer and find out what the hell is going on. That's why also the Janet Yellen being on their team is so important, right? You got to remind them Janet Yellen is on their team. But the best one of team switching and what's going on and the way to understand it is like this, right? So with RFK's candidacy, right? So there was a fake news article today where NBC News, right? Totally trustworthy. NBC News is saying that Trump is now losing by like double digits against Biden in the polls because of the RFK influence. That RFK is so wildly popular amongst MAGA that it's clear it's not even at issue anymore that he's going to draw voters away from Republicans and he's going to hand the White House to Biden. This only comes from NBC, right? So what do we know about NBC News, right? It's not trustworthy. Now, this trading of the team here is important, right? So by Kennedy becoming a independent candidate, you've got these tribal team situations. What we know about NBC is that it's not trustworthy at all, right? So the way you can use this is more or less what I've been talking about. If you get the news from NBC, it should be looked at suspiciously, right? So on that one, you turn it into betting basically for the sports ball person, right? Like I bet they're totally off and get them to follow that train of thought. And I think they'll come up to a pretty interesting conclusion. So that's just one. So let's just go over them again, right? We've got the credentialist, right? We've got the follower. We've got the sports ball person. Next up is Karens. Karens, that's another NPC type, right? We love Karens. So Karens, right? The wants and fears are control and opposition, right? Control and opposition. Almost any form of opposition to a norm, the Karen is going to complain. Now, the Karen has one major exploitable reference point, which is the following. The Karen is 100% self-interested, right? That's why the Karen will always put their need for comfort above anyone. That's why the complaints in a corporate setting or in a commercial consumer setting are always so high, right? It's the entitlement that comes with being a Karen that's so revelatory and shows who they are. Now, because the Karen is self-serving, she or he, we have male Karens for sure, right? The Karen can actually be exploited by their self-interest, right? So because they're so self-interested, all you need to do with the Karen is to get them thinking about the economy, right? So things like this would work great, right? So all this war, right? Professor St. Oge having this tweet yesterday, it may be World War III, but stocks are loving it. The Fed built a world where every crisis is run through the money printers until Wall Street gets paid while the rest of us bleed. We saw it in COVID. Now we're seeing it with war. Step by step, the country goes down, with Wall Street getting paid each step of the way. So you can use that that whole thing, right, to show that if you keep with these folks, you're going to be in big trouble, right? So the opposition here becomes warranted because complaining about the money being stolen is an easy mimetic thing for most people to believe in, right? It doesn't really, most people have already been persuaded that money is corrupting and you shouldn't trust corporate institutions and things like that. So you don't have to do too much persuading on that. They're already persuaded. What you got to get them to do is just see the contrast and ask some questions about the banking sector. And remember, you have to prey on their own self-preservation, that the system won't work for them, right? So it's not an argument. You just have to bring up the reasons for which this thing is happening and the reasons why Wall Street's got trouble, home buying's got trouble, right? Because Karens, don't forget, look like assholes because of inflation, right? They look like assholes when they can't do more. Poor me, yeah, it's a poor me thing, but you're exploiting that poor me, right? You're exploring, definitely. And Tommy says they're good cannon fodder. They are, yeah. So in the book, I actually give a tip that they're mostly to be avoided, right? You can't really do too much with them. Your numbers of conversion will be lower with Karens for sure. But again, they do have this exploitable aspect of self-preservation and self-centeredness that can easily be engaged for you to get the Karen on your side. So I think Karens might come en masse, right? So then we'll have to use them, right? Nothing you can do about it. So there's them. And finally, the next one, nihilists, right? So nihilists. Their first contact story with Bitcoin is usually, it's never going to work. It's stupid, right? It's too complicated. We live in a shitty place. We got to get used to it, right? Now, the nihilist is supremely logical, right? So it's the want and fear is simple. It's right and wrong, right? They want to be right, don't want to be wrong. So that's a pretty easy thing to work with in a sense. And the best way to get them going, all right, the best way to get a nihilist going is to get them on the subject of elections, right? A nihilist is usually a little bit pessimistic about America. They're naturally not trusting anybody, right? No one gets the trust, right? Not Republicans, not Democrats. So they're pretty close to where they need to be. To get them over the edge, right? The nihilist lacks a bit of imagination. And one of the things that they lack imagination in is tackling some of these big epic questions that have huge, profound implications, because you actually have to remodel and reconfigure your whole projections about the future when you accept some of this information, like election systems in America having, sketchy credibility. And that's where I would go with this. That's where I do go with it, right? Is more or less the same way Poliver got this fella to try and ask us basic, simple question, right? With the nihilist, you can get them thinking about elections. And one of the ways to do that is to make the easy contrast that I always make. Well, everything's broken, right? It doesn't look like anything's working in America right now, which a nihilist, you can assume the payload would concur with that, right? Good thing the elections work great. Good thing they're perfect, right? Good thing we have no worries about the elections and they all work great. And what you can do there is just bring up one of these clearly the same people not voting for Jim Jordan right now to be Speaker of the Republican House, right? So that vote will be going on all day. He's about 7 or 8 votes away from being elected. One of the people who stands in his way is Ken Buck. And this is what Ken Buck said yesterday on CNN. I don't want someone who was involved in the activities of January, and these are Republican, by the way. Ken Buck's a Republican. Involved in the activities of January 6th, there's no way we win the majority if the message we send to the American people is we believe in the election, that in the election was wah wah. And we believe that January 6th was a tour of the Capitol. So with that about right and wrong, you just got to get them thinking about the election. You got to get them motivated to think more about it. And if you can, right, if you can get them to think more about the election, they'll come to the conclusion that there's a lot of questions. So that's a bit of a trial on the book. That's more or less what I'm doing. The actual 5 sections that I have in the book are identify, specify, electrify, amplify, which is a special section on politics where you can really get into this distorting clown world stuff, right? Where you can take things to their extreme in order to get people to agree, right? An example of that would be, I'm for maximum money printing for everything. Right? Let's print money, right? Of course I am. As an accelerationist, almost anything that falls into the accelerationist category, like what are they voting on today? 100 billion for Ukraine, but now they're going to get it in Ukraine because there's Israel. So you can say things like, why don't we do 200, 300, 400 billion, right? Let's just go ride it, right? So what you got to do is you got to get into the absurd with that stuff. And it usually will help the nihilist understand that we live in a clown world. And the right and wrong part will help motivate them because they don't want to be with the clowns, right? Most people don't want to be with the clowns, right? We can assume that. So that section is on how to electrify, specifically in the realm of politics. So there you go. That's the story. Those are the news stories today. It'll make more sense when it's in the book, I think. But give me your thoughts, right? Let me hear what you got on this boomer stuff. We got veterans. Getting them to explain will expose that the sheeples are actually clueless posers who are led about by psychological operations of Mockingbird Media, Matrix, Mayhem, Madman. Yeah, absolutely. But getting them to realize that the only way to do it is not by telling them, right? Not by getting angry, not by arguing. Get them to explain things to you. And when they see the holes, they'll be more likely maybe to go and get it. But I think we're dealing with baseball statistics here, right? Like 10%, 20%. Like you're good at this when you get it up to 20%, right? You're an all-star Bitcoin orange pillar if you're at 30% convertibility, right? That's like, if you hit 40%, you're Hall of Fame Bitcoiner. But we don't have a choice, guys. I mean, that's literally why I'm doing this. I see no other way besides motivating all Bitcoiners to go on actual deprogramming missions within their own circles, within their own groups. So the book will be out before Thanksgiving because we need it, right? Pay double and things work out fine. Yeah, pay double your tax. Yeah, I want to pay double my taxes, Gordon. I want to pay double, right? I think we can all agree most of us are just Wojaks, always battling the other mentioned NPCs. Yeah, we're Muslim Bitcoiner. The last chapter of my book is for Bitcoin NPCs. So when I say wants and fears, we have them too, right? That we're not excluded for this. We're not more logical. We're not any of those things, right? There is, as Bitcoin Graffiti reminds us, an NPC in all of us. That's the next layer of awakening, right? We see half the people as brainwashed. When we realize that incentives and follow the money are a lot more powerful than we ever realized, we'll be ready for Bitcoin. Bitcoin will help shave off a little bit of the NPC nature from us. So there you go. Karens and sport ballers make up 99% of the people. Thank God I have my 1% of Bitcoiners. Yeah, there's a lot of Karens and sports ballers out there. Also, boomers. Yeah, boomers can fall into all this. I think they're always significant NPC group that can tilt the future. Yeah, yeah. Well, they might not make it through this though. They're not doing great. Reporting for duty, sir. Bring the orange pills to my circle every day. Great downtown music. We love it. We love it. We love it. All right. Austin. Still plenty of time for governments to make their move. Yeah, I think this is hold on. That was my fear prior. I thought the government would do everything they could to block it because it was such a threat to their control mechanism. I was super surprised when it didn't happen. Yeah. My credentials are my 24 seed phrases stamped on metal. Do you think the fear of government shutting it down is recognition of government corruption? I think you mean Bitcoin. Oh yeah, it must be because I was talking about government's going to shut it down. Yeah, I for one welcome my forthcoming dipper. Okay. Could be fun. So the answer in my book to shutting it down is I encourage them to try. It would be really a lot of fun. China tried, it didn't work out. So I want to see someone else try. We need the info, so go try to ban it. It won't work. So now you don't do this as an argument. You just say, as a matter of fact, well, people have been trying to do it for a long time and it hasn't really worked out, right? Now, if you need to get into the arguments, of course, Bitcoin always in America can rely on freedom of speech, I think. I've always believed that it's a First Amendment issue. So we have some legal protection there. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Thanks for coming, and we'll see you tomorrow. And we should have more fake news that we can dissect and more ways of reprogramming NPCs. All right, team. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it.